They say the Wild West was a land of men with pistols and horses, with cattle drives and gold. Dust, but behind every lawman, outlaw, and drifter was a woman who bore more weight than bullets. Frontier women were not side characters, they were the backbone of the West, carving lives out of rock and dust, raising children in the shadows of danger, facing a world that demanded everything and offered little in return. To understand the true spirit of the frontier, one must look beyond the saloons and the sheriffs and see the women who walked through storms, who buried their babies with their bare hands, who worked from dawn until the stars rose and never asked for glory in the beginning. They came by wagon and by rail, young girls, wide-eyed with hope, or mothers clutching infants as the trail stretched before them for hundreds of miles. The journey alone was enough to break a spirit, but many endured children were born in rattling wagons, delivered by their own mothers, while oxen groaned in the dirt. Some women buried husbands along the way, to sickness, to accidents, to raids, and they pressed on alone. Because turning back was never an option when they arrived at their patch of earth. It was just that earth, no house, no road, no neighbors, just endless sky and wild silence. And it fell to the women to tame it, as the men built cabins or hunted. The women planted the first seeds, cooked over open. Fires slept on straw and gave birth on floors they swept themselves in. Summer they boiled water in iron pots and bathed children who cried from heat. In winter they split wood, wrapped little ones in flour sacks, and prayed the chimney held. Most women lost at least one child to fever, to rattlesnakes, to cold. Many lost more yet. They kept going. They made soap from lye, churned butter in silence, boiled linens in copper kettles, and taught their daughters to do the same. By candlelight they read from tattered Bibles or traced letters in dirt to teach the alphabet to boys who might someday ride for miles, but would always remember Mama teaching them under a leaking roof. Frontier women were doctors when no doctor could come, midwives when birth arrived, suddenly undertakers when death came too early, and preachers when sorrow needed words. They stitched wounds with bone needles set broken, arms with splints made from fence posts, and sang lullabies with cracked voices to drown out the sound of coyotes too close for comfort on Sundays, if there was a Sunday. They wore dresses patched 20 times and walked to church, sometimes in shoes too small, sometimes barefoot. They prayed not for riches, but for rain, for enough corn to last the winter, for a healthy cow, and for strength to do it all again tomorrow. Some women were school teachers, riding horseback to one room, schoolhouses, lighting stoves before sunrise, teaching numbers to boys who smelled of horses and mud, and fighting for respect in towns where women were seen but not heard. Some ran boarding houses, cooking 3 meals a day for strangers, sleeping with pistols under their pillows and keeping order with a cast iron skillet in hand. There were women like Clara in Nebraska who raised 8 children alone after her husband was killed in a flood, and never remarried. She plowed the field herself with a borrowed mule, sold eggs and dried herbs, and when the drought came she boiled bark to make tea. There was Eliza in Montana who ran the local post office, taught music lessons, and nursed the dying when an outbreak of typhoid swept through the town. She was the only one who stayed, burying the dead and comforting the living until she too fell sick and died. Without ceremony, there were women like Mary Fields, a former slave who became a mail carrier in Montana, delivering letters through blizzards. Gun in hand, cigar clenched in her teeth, she dared anyone to question her strength, and many learned not to. Frontier women were indigenous, too forced from their lands, or fighting to defend them. They raised their children with stories and songs. Their names barely remembered in the history books, but their wisdom carried through generations. They taught how to find roots in winter, how to track water in dry wind, how to honor the earth even when the earth had been stolen. Some women ran saloons, with sharp eyes and sharper tongues, keeping peace where men brought chaos. Others followed traveling shows or worked in hotels or danced in smoky rooms, each one with a past, each one with a story that could quiet a room if anyone cared to ask, and many did not, because in the West women were expected to endure, not to speak the letters. They wrote, told stories, history, forgot letters to sisters back east, describing the birth of twins by lantern light, the washing of blood from floorboards, the way the prairie looked under moonlight. After burying a son, they spoke of hope, too, of love found in the strangest places, of quiet mornings with coffee and no fire to tend to watching a baby take its first step in a cabin built with tired hands and fierce hearts. There were joyful moments too, barn dances with fiddle songs, warm bread pulled from wood stoves, quilts stitched with memories, shared laughter around a fire of snow piled high outside, and girls who dreamed of more, reading novels by lamplight and wondering what lay beyond the hills. And sometimes they left. Some joined circuses or moved to cities or became writers or nurses or ranched on their own land. But many stayed, lived, died, and were buried under stones that read simply wife or mother yet. What they did was nothing short of heroic. They endured the unendurable. They dreamed when dreams were dangerous. They created life in a world that often tried to destroy it, and they did it with no fanfare, no parade, no headline in Kansas. There was a woman named Ruth who taught freed slaves how to read in secret, risking her life every night, lighting one lamp behind heavy curtains in Arizona. A woman named Sophia traveled from homestead to homestead, delivering babies, hundreds of them, with no formal training, just hands steady with love and purpose. In Wyoming, a young widow named Rachel built a schoolhouse with her bare hands and refused to close its doors even when the snow reached the window ledges, even when she had only 2 students left, because education mattered and so did dignity. These women were not just survivors, they were architects of community, the first to build trust, the first to offer shelter, the first to say, come in, have something warm. The West was wild, but it was not built by violence alone. It was built by care, by sacrifice, by the quiet power of women who held it all together while history looked the other way there. Voices may not echo through textbooks, but they echo in the bones of the land, in every broken wagon wheel, in every crumbling homestead, in every faded photograph of a woman who looks too tired, too proud, too alive to ever be forgotten. They live in the strength of every woman who carries on today with burdens unseen and love unspoken. They live in the stories we tell now, in the moments we choose to remember, their strength, their sorrow, their joy, their fire, because the truth is the West was never just a place, it was a test, and the women of the frontier passed that test every day, dust in their lungs and babies in their arms and hearts. Too big for this world.